The Whitmore dining room looked like something out of a home magazine. Polished mahogany table, soft amber lights reflecting off a wall of glass that overlooked the gray waters of Puget Sound. Outside, rain rolled lazily down the windows, blurring the skyline of Seattle. Inside, the air was still, except for the faint clinking of silverware on china. Diana Whitmore sat perfectly straight, every movement deliberate, graceful, almost rehearsed. She carved her roast beef carefully, as if the act itself demanded control. Across from her sat Rachel, her husband's 18-year-old daughter, home from art school. The girl's posture was casual, her tone careless, but her eyes were anything but. They were fixed on Diana, full of unspoken challenges. "Pass the salt, please," Diana said finally, forcing a polite smile. Rachel didn't answer right away. She reached for the shaker slowly, fingers brushing against Diana's as she handed it over. That touch, brief, electric, made Diana's breath catch. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer than she meant it to be. At the head of the table, Charles Whitmore scrolled through stock updates on his phone, oblivious to the invisible storm between his wife and daughter. His business trips had become routine. London, Tokyo, Dubai. Always another flight, another deal. He only looked up when the silence became too heavy to ignore. "Oh, by the way," he said, setting down his phone, "I'm leaving for Tokyo tomorrow. The Japanese contract needs my signature in person." Diana's knife paused mid-cut. "Tomorrow? You just got back from London on Monday." Rachel's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She looked down quickly, pretending to focus on her plate. "It's business, darling," Charles replied, his voice calm but firm. 3 weeks, maybe a month." Diana nodded, pretending to sound concerned. But what she really felt, what she fought not to show, was relief. A month. A month without pretending. Without watching Rachel across the table and remembering things she shouldn't remember. "That's a long time," she said softly. "Everything will be fine," Charles said, smiling faintly. "You and Rachel will keep each other company, won't you?" The corner of Rachel's mouth lifted. That half-smile Diana once found charming, now terrifying. "I'll take good care of her," Rachel said, her voice honeyed, eyes glinting with something only Diana could read. Diana's pulse quickened. She could feel the heat creeping up her neck. Every word from the girl sounded like a secret being spoken in code. Charles, pleased by the family's civility, turned the conversation to lighter things. "How's school, Rachel? How's that art exhibit you mentioned?" Rachel perked up, eager to please him. "Professor Higgins chose my painting for the spring show." "That's wonderful," Charles said, genuine pride filling his voice. "You've got your mother's talent." At the mention of his late wife, Elizabeth, both women stiffened. Rachel lowered her gaze. Diana forced a polite smile. She had married Charles 3 years after Elizabeth's death, stepped into a house that still smelled of another woman's perfume, a family that had never truly made space for her. "You're nothing like Mom," Rachel murmured suddenly, barely audible, but Diana heard it. The remark stung, not because it was cruel, but because it carried a truth neither of them could face. Diana's beauty was colder, more severe than Elizabeth's soft charm. But what truly separated them wasn't appearance. It was the unspeakable bond Diana and Rachel now shared, one born out of grief, loneliness, and a single night that should have never happened. Diana looked down at her plate, pushing food she could no longer taste. She had told herself it was just a moment of weakness, a storm-struck night by the fire, 2 hearts searching for warmth. But the memory had burrowed deep, replaying in her mind whenever Rachel walked into the room. When she finally looked up, Rachel was already staring at her. The girl's blue eyes were unreadable, but a faint smile tugged at her lips, as if daring Diana to break first. Outside, thunder rolled far across the sound. Charles stood and adjusted his tie. "I'll start packing," he said cheerfully, unaware of the fissure widening between the 2 women he loved most. "Early flight tomorrow." Diana nodded automatically, her throat dry. Rachel watched him leave, then turned back to her stepmother. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence. Then Rachel whispered, so low only Diana could hear, 3 weeks. Just us. Diana's fork slipped from her hand, clattering onto the porcelain plate. The sharp sound echoed through the immaculate room, slicing through the illusion of order. And somewhere deep inside, Diana knew the real storm hadn't even started yet. The cabin at Silver Pine Lake had always been Charles's favorite escape, a quiet retreat surrounded by tall evergreens and icy waters that mirrored the gray Washington sky. That December weekend, it was supposed to be a peaceful getaway for the family, a chance for Diana to bond with her stepdaughter while Charles wrapped up work in Seattle. But then, the snow came early, heavy and relentless. Within hours, the narrow road leading out of the woods was buried, and the power lines went down. The house fell into silence except for the howl of wind and the crackle of the fireplace. Diana tried to stay composed. She poured a glass of Cabernet and wrapped herself in a blanket, pretending not to notice Rachel's gaze from across the room. The girl sat curled on the couch, sketchbook in hand, a faint smile playing on her lips as if she knew this isolation meant something neither of them could say out loud. "Looks like we're stuck," Rachel said, flipping a page with a small laugh. "Guess it's just us tonight." Diana managed a polite smile. "So it seems." Outside, snowflakes pressed against the windows, blurring the world into white. The flickering fire painted their faces in shades of gold and shadow. Soft, intimate, dangerous. Rachel set her sketchbook aside and opened a bottle of wine. "Dad won't mind if we start without him," she teased, handing Diana a glass. Their fingers brushed, just for a second, and something unspoken passed between them. They drank in silence for a while. The storm howled louder. Then, like a thread pulling loose, the conversation shifted from small talk to something deeper. Rachel spoke of her late mother, Elizabeth, the woman whose ghost still seemed to live in every corner of the Whitmore home. She was everything, Rachel said softly. Beautiful, smart kind. Everyone adored her. When she died, the world just stopped. Diana listened, guilt tugging at her chest. She had spent 3 years trying to fill a void that was never meant for her. "I'm not here to replace her, Rachel," she said quietly. "I just wanted us to have peace." Rachel looked up, eyes glistening in the firelight. "Peace?" She gave a short, bitter laugh. "You think peace comes after death?" "No. It just leaves questions no one wants to answer." Diana didn't know how to respond. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. To change the subject, she told a story from her college years, a foolish night of rebellion, a brief romance with a girl who painted sunsets on dorm walls and whispered that love had no gender. She spoke of it lightly, almost as a confession to the flames, but Rachel's expression changed. The spark in her eyes deepened into something else, fascination, maybe recognition. "So you've loved a woman before," Rachel said, almost a whisper. "It was a long time ago," Diana replied quickly. "I was young, confused." Rachel tilted her head, studying her. "Maybe you weren't confused. Maybe you just learned how to hide it better." The words hit harder than Diana expected. Silence stretched between them again. The storm outside raged, the fire cracked, and the clock ticked past midnight. Rachel moved to throw another log onto the fire, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. The smell of wood smoke and wine filled the room. "You're always so controlled," she said. "So proper. Doesn't it ever get exhausting?" Diana gave a quiet, nervous laugh. "Maybe it does. Then stop pretending." Rachel's voice was soft but steady. She stepped closer. The flames painted her skin in warm tones, and her eyes seemed to glow. "Rachel," Diana began, but her voice faltered. Rachel reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Diana's face. "You don't have to be anyone's stepmother tonight," she murmured. "Just be human." For one suspended heartbeat, time stopped. The storm outside, the guilt, the years between them, all blurred into a single fragile moment. Diana's glass slipped from her hand, shattering softly against the hearth. And then Rachel kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, searching, full of all the pain they'd both buried. The kiss deepened, tangled with the sound of the fire and the wind pounding against the walls. When they finally broke apart, neither spoke. The storm still raged outside, but inside, the world had gone still, dangerous and quiet. Rachel smiled faintly, her voice trembling. Now we can stop pretending. Diana didn't answer. She only stared into the fire, her pulse racing with fear and something darker. The knowledge that a line had been crossed that could never be erased. And when morning came, the snow had stopped, but something in both of them had changed forever. When the snow melted, life at the Whitmore home returned to its usual rhythm. Or at least, that's what Diana told herself. Charles came back from his trip full of stories about Tokyo investors and endless meetings. Rachel returned to her art classes, smiling just enough to convince everyone she was fine. And Diana resumed her daily routines. Morning coffee, afternoon gallery meetings, polite dinner conversations. But nothing felt normal anymore. Every time she passed Rachel's bedroom door, her heartbeat quickened. The scent of her shampoo lingered in the hall, sharp and sweet like citrus and danger. In the kitchen, their hands would brush when reaching for the same plate. Every touch, every glance was a reminder of that night at Silver Pine, of the firelight and the way guilt had tasted like wine. It was supposed to be one mistake, a moment of weakness, but secrets have a way of growing roots. At first, Rachel was subtle. She'd stay late at school, claiming to work on art projects, then text Diana. Can you pick me up? Those car rides became their first stolen moments. They'd talk about nothing and everything. Art, loneliness, how grief never truly leaves. When Diana parked in the driveway, there was always a pause before Rachel got out. A pause heavy enough to say we're not done yet. Soon, coincidences turned into patterns. Rachel started dropping by Diana's gallery, pretending to help organize exhibits. She'd stand too close, whisper too softly, laugh at things that weren't funny. Once, when Charles called from London, Diana hung up to find Rachel leaning against her desk, eyes smoldering. You shouldn't be here, Diana whispered. Rachel smiled. You said that last time. And like before, neither of them stopped. Their secret meetings multiplied, sometimes in the back of the gallery after hours, sometimes in hotel rooms Diana reserved under fake names, and sometimes, when Charles was gone, in the very bed where he and his wife slept. It was reckless, addictive, and it made Diana hate herself. She tried to end it more than once. This isn't right, she said one night, after Rachel had fallen asleep beside her. You're too young. You deserve something real. Rachel's reply came softly, without opening her eyes. I already have something real. By February, whispers began to spread. A colleague mentioned seeing Diana near the university campus. Another noticed Rachel's car parked outside the gallery late at night. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make Diana's stomach tighten every time her phone buzzed. Then came the painting. Charles had asked Rachel to submit something for the annual charity auction, a portrait, something bold. The unveiling happened one Saturday evening. When the sheet dropped, the room fell silent. It was a nude woman, half in shadow, half illuminated by firelight. Her face obscured, but the curve of her neck, the line of her shoulders, the delicate hands resting on her knees, they were unmistakably Diana's. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Charles, smiling proudly, clapped his hands. That's extraordinary, Rachel. Who's the model? Rachel smiled, eyes fixed on Diana. Someone I know very well. Diana excused herself, trembling as she stepped outside for air. Rachel followed moments later, her heels crunching on the gravel. Why would you do that? Diana hissed. You might as well have told him. Rachel's tone was calm, almost innocent. I wanted to honor you. You're my muse. Muse, Diana whispered. You're going to destroy us. Rachel's expression changed, soft to sharp in an instant. You say us, like you still believe in it. I don't know what I believe anymore, Diana said, voice shaking. Rachel stepped closer. You love me. I know you do. Diana shook her head. I made a mistake. Rachel's smile faded. Then why do you keep making it? The question hung between them like fog, thick, impossible to escape. That night, when Diana returned home, Charles was already asleep. She stood in the doorway, watching him breathe, feeling like a stranger in her own marriage. Upstairs, the faint hum of music came from Rachel's room, the same melody she had played by the fire at Silverpine. Diana closed her eyes, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. The rhythm of her heartbeat was uneven, frantic, alive. She knew this couldn't last, that secrets like theirs never stayed buried. But even as she told herself to walk away, a darker truth whispered beneath the guilt. She didn't want to. And somewhere in the house above her, Rachel smiled in the dark because she knew that too. The morning Diana Whitmore received the email, the world outside her window looked deceptively calm. Seattle was gray as always, fog pressing low against the water, gulls crying somewhere over Puget Sound. Inside the Whitmore residence, the silence felt heavier than usual. Charles was already gone on another business trip, and the house, once her sanctuary, now felt like a trap filled with memories she couldn't escape. She'd gone to the doctor a week earlier for what she told herself was just a routine checkup. Fatigue, night sweats, a rash across her chest. She had blamed stress, maybe an allergy. Dr. Laura Kane had recommended a full panel, blood count, hormone levels, infection screening, just to be thorough. Diana hadn't thought much of it. She had lived her entire life carefully, cleanly, in control. But that morning, when she saw the email from Seattle's Central Medical Laboratory, her hand trembled before she even clicked it open. The report was sterile, clinical. Numbers, abbreviations, charts. She skimmed until she saw it. The single word that would rearrange her entire life. Positive. HIV positive. The coffee cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the tile. The sound barely registered over the rush of blood in her ears. For a few long seconds, she couldn't breathe. The word blinked at her from the screen, merciless and absolute. Her first instinct was denial. This had to be a mistake, maybe a lab error. She wasn't that kind of person. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't. But then the memories came, creeping in like ghosts. Rachel, the nights they spent tangled in sweat and silence. The toothbrush she'd borrowed during that weekend at Silver Pine, when hers was left behind. The faint rash she had noticed on Rachel's arm months ago. The box of pills she'd once seen in the girl's bag. Antivirals, she realized now, not vitamins. The truth slammed into her like cold water. When Rachel came downstairs later that morning, wearing one of Charles's t-shirts and humming softly, Diana could barely stand to look at her. "Morning," Rachel said, smiling sleepily. "You look pale. Didn't sleep?" Diana didn't answer. Her voice had abandoned her. "What's wrong?" Rachel asked, crossing the kitchen. Diana held up her phone wordlessly. The lab report glowed on the screen between them. "Explain this." Rachel froze. For a moment, her mask slipped, the calm, confident artist giving way to something raw, frightened. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "The truth," Diana snapped. "Did you know?" Rachel's lips parted, but no words came. The silence between them felt like the eye of a storm, calm, but only for a second. "You knew," Diana whispered, realization hitting her like a blow. All this time, Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said quietly. "I'm on medication. My viral load is undetectable. The risk was minimal." Diana's voice broke into a sharp, bitter laugh. "You call this minimal?" She pointed to the phone, her hand shaking. "You infected me, Rachel." Rachel stepped closer, desperate. "No, I didn't mean to. I swear. I wanted us to be together. By giving me a disease." Tears streamed down Rachel's face now. "You were going to leave me. I could feel it. Every time you looked at him, every time you talked about your gallery, your perfect life, I knew I was just a mistake you wanted to forget. I couldn't let you go." Diana backed away, trembling. "So you took that choice from me?" Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. "Now you can't leave. We're the same. One blood. One virus." The words chilled Diana more than the winter air ever could. She slapped her, the sound cracking through the kitchen like lightning. "You're sick," Diana whispered, her voice trembling with fury and heartbreak. "Not because of the virus, because of what you did." Rachel didn't fight back. She just stood there, tears glistening, blood at the corner of her lip, whispering again and again, "You love me. You said you loved me." Diana turned away, pressing her palms to the counter to keep from collapsing. Her reflection in the glass door looked unfamiliar. Haunted, hollow, already fading. "Get out," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "Go upstairs. I can't even look at you." Rachel lingered for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she obeyed, footsteps soft against the stairs. When the door closed, Diana slid to the floor, her whole body shaking. Outside, the rain started again, tapping gently against the glass, steady, relentless, indifferent. And for the first time in her life, Diana Whitmore didn't know whether she was the victim of a crime or the author of one. The house was too quiet. It had been 48 hours since the confrontation, since the test results, the slap, and the words Diana wished she could take back. Rachel hadn't spoken much since then. She stayed upstairs, curtains drawn, moving like a ghost through the halls. Diana avoided her as best she could, keeping herself busy cleaning, reorganizing drawers, pretending there was still order left in the world. But by Friday evening, the silence felt unbearable. Charles had called from Tokyo that morning. His voice sounded cheerful, unaware of the storm brewing thousands of miles away. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart," he'd said. "I'll be home in a few weeks." When the call ended, Diana stood in the kitchen staring at the phone, thinking about how easy it would be to tell him everything, to confess, to free herself from the web she'd woven. But then she imagined his face, the disbelief, the disgust, the loss. And she couldn't do it. By sunset, she poured herself a glass of wine. It didn't help. The wine only made her heart beat louder, the guilt heavier. Upstairs, she could hear faint music playing from Rachel's room, a melancholy tune she didn't recognize. Then came the footsteps. Rachel appeared in the doorway, barefoot, wearing one of Diana's silk robes. Her eyes were red, but there was a calmness to her that frightened Diana more than her tears. "You look exhausted," Rachel said softly. "You haven't eaten all day." Diana didn't respond. She took another sip of wine instead. Rachel stepped closer. "We should talk. There's nothing left to talk about. There's everything to talk about." Rachel's tone sharpened. "You can't just decide we're done. You don't get to walk away from me like this." Diana set her glass down, jaw tightening. "I never belonged to you, Rachel." This, she gestured between them, was a mistake. Rachel laughed, bitter and shaky. "A mistake? Is that what you tell yourself so you can sleep at night?" "Stop it. You used me," Rachel pressed, her voice rising. "You made me believe you loved me. And then when it got inconvenient, you called it wrong." "Because it was wrong," Diana snapped. "I was your stepmother, for God's sake." Rachel's eyes flared. "You didn't care about that at Silver Pine." Diana flinched at the name, as though it were a wound being reopened. That night never should have happened. But it did. Rachel's voice trembled now, caught between rage and heartbreak. And it changed everything. She took a step closer, and Diana instinctively backed away until her hip hit the counter. The air between them crackled. "You infected me," Diana said quietly. "You took away my life. I gave you a new one," Rachel shot back. "One where you can't pretend anymore. You can't go back to your perfect world because now you're part of mine." "Part of your nightmare, you mean?" Diana said, her voice breaking. Rachel's expression shifted, something dangerous flickering behind her eyes. "You're not going to tell him, are you? About us? About the virus?" "I don't know yet. Because if you do," Rachel's tone dropped, trembling but sharp, "I'll tell him everything. Every detail. Every time you said my name." The threat hung heavy in the air. Diana's pulse pounded in her ears. "You wouldn't." Rachel smiled faintly. "You think I won't burn it all down? Watch me." Diana's hand slammed against the counter. "Enough," she cried. "I have lived in your shadow long enough, Rachel. I am done letting you control me." Rachel's voice cracked into a scream. "You can't control what we are." In one violent motion, she grabbed the wine glass and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, red streaks running down the paint like blood. "Stop this," Diana shouted. "You need help." Rachel stepped forward again, shaking, her voice shaking with fury. "You don't get to fix me. You broke me." Diana reached for the phone on the counter. "I'm calling the police." Rachel lunged before she could dial. The two women collided, struggling for control. The phone clattered to the floor. Rachel's nails dug into Diana's neck, leaving raw red trails. Diana shoved her back, gasping. "Don't touch me." Rachel grabbed the nearest thing, an ashtray, and flung it. It missed by inches, crashing against the mirror behind Diana. Shards of glass rained down like tiny stars. The sound seemed to snap something inside both of them. Rachel rushed forward again, this time holding a jagged piece of the broken mirror. "If I can't have you," she cried, "no one will." "Rachel, stop." But she didn't. She swung wildly. Diana ducked, felt the wind of the glass slice the air beside her cheek. Instinct took over. She reached for the nearest object, the bronze sculpture Charles had given her for their anniversary. "Don't make me do this," she pleaded. Rachel's eyes blazed with something feral. "You already did." Then she lunged. The sculpture came down hard. The sound a dull, sickening thud that echoed through the house. For a second, the world went completely still. Rachel stumbled backward, eyes wide, a thin line of blood tracing down her temple. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. She collapsed onto the carpet, motionless. Diana dropped the sculpture. It hit the floor with a heavy clang. She fell to her knees beside Rachel, her trembling hands hovering uselessly over the girl's chest. "Rachel, Rachel, please." No pulse, no breath, just silence. The fire crackled in the distance, and the rain began again, whispering against the windows. And in that terrible quiet, Diana realized something she would never say aloud. It wasn't hate that killed Rachel Whitmore. It was love that had gone rotten. The sound of the front door unlocking froze Diana where she stood. She had only seconds to comprehend it. The faint rattle of keys, the steady footsteps in the hallway, before a voice called out, warm and familiar. "Diana? Rachel? I'm home." Her heart stopped. "Charles." For a split second, she thought she must be hallucinating. He wasn't supposed to be home for another 3 weeks. But then he spoke again, his voice echoing through the blood-stained quiet. "Flight got canceled. Some technical issue. You won't believe the mess at the airport." His footsteps drew closer, unhurried, still innocent of what waited beyond the door. Diana's mind raced. She looked around the living room. The shattered mirror, overturned lamp, the bronze sculpture lying in a pool of crimson. Rachel's body sprawled across the rug, glass glinting like ice around her. The smell of iron hung heavy in the air. She should call the police. She should scream, confess, explain everything. But all she could do was stare at her blood-streaked hands. Charles appeared in the doorway and stopped cold. The color drained from his face. "Oh my God, Diana." He dropped his suitcase. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. His eyes flicked from his wife to the lifeless form on the carpet, and the horror in them was something Diana would never forget. What happened? For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Then the words tumbled out, broken and frantic. "It was an accident. She attacked me. I didn't mean to." Charles stepped closer, his voice trembling. "Attacked you? With what?" Diana pointed weakly toward the shards of glass glittering beneath the lamp. She tried to. I had to defend myself." Charles knelt beside Rachel, his hands shaking as he reached for her wrist. "Rachel? Honey." Silence. Only the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the patter of rain outside. When he looked up, his expression was something between disbelief and devastation. "She's gone." "I'm sorry," Diana whispered, sobbing now. "I didn't want." Charles grabbed her by the shoulders. "What did you do?" His voice wasn't angry yet. It was desperate, pleading. The kind of tone that belonged to a man, still hoping this was some terrible misunderstanding. "She came at me," Diana cried. "She was out of control, Charles. I tried to stop her. I swear to you." "Over what?" His eyes searched hers, wild and red. What could possibly? Diana's answer caught in her throat. She couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not this. Charles staggered back, running a trembling hand through his hair. Jesus Christ. The phone still lay on the floor, its screen cracked. He lunged for it, dialing with unsteady fingers. "This is Charles Whitmore. My daughter, she's hurt. There's blood everywhere. Please send someone. Now." Within minutes, the house filled with flashing red and blue. Police, paramedics, neighbors drawn by curiosity. The storm outside had turned to a downpour, the sound of rain blending with the hiss of radio chatter. Detective Aaron Miles arrived just after 10 p.m., tall, composed, eyes sharp beneath his soaked fedora. He'd seen hundreds of scenes like this, but something about this one felt different. The house was too pristine, too expensive, too full of quiet ghosts. He stepped inside, surveying the chaos. Broken glass. Furniture overturned. One bronze sculpture in an evidence bag, its edges smeared with dark red. In the corner of the room, Diana sat wrapped in a blanket, her face pale, neck streaked with scratches. Charles hovered nearby, arms folded tight, jaw locked. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, Detective Miles said evenly, flashing his badge. I'm very sorry for your loss. I'll need to ask you both a few questions. Charles spoke first, his tone clipped. It was self-defense. My daughter attacked my wife. She had problems. Emotional ones. Miles nodded slowly, then turned to Diana. Is that true, ma'am? Diana's voice came out thin and shaking. Yes. She was upset. I don't even remember what started it. She grabbed something sharp. I panicked. Miles studied her face, the tremor in her hands, the distant look in her eyes, and made note. And you hit her with the sculpture? Diana nodded. I didn't think. I just reacted. The detective crouched near the blood-stained rug, his trained eyes tracing the arc of impact, the spatter on the wall. There was a struggle, he murmured. Intense one. Paramedics wheeled Rachel's body out beneath a white sheet. Charles turned away, shoulders shaking, lips pressed tight to keep from crying in front of strangers. Miles closed his notebook, stepping back toward Diana. We'll need your full statement at the station, Mrs. Whitmore, and we'll collect your clothing for evidence. Do you understand? She nodded faintly. As the officers moved around them, Charles stood motionless, staring at the space where his daughter had lain. His voice, when it came, was hollow. She was just a child, he whispered. Diana looked at him, eyes wet and wide. No, Charles, she said softly. She wasn't. Outside, thunder rolled over the sound again, louder this time, as if the heavens themselves were taking sides. And for the first time since the night at Silver Pine, Diana Whitmore realized there was no going back. Whatever story she told the police, whatever lies she built to survive, the truth would find its way to the surface. Because blood always does. Detective Aaron Miles had seen hundreds of crime scenes in his career, domestic disputes, accidents turned deadly, the occasional crime of passion. But something about the Whitmore house didn't fit into any category. Everything about it felt rehearsed, like a play that had been performed one too many times. Only this time, the ending went wrong. 3 days after the incident, Miles returned with a warrant to conduct a deeper search. The first walkthrough had told him what Diana wanted him to see: a fight, an act of self-defense, a tragic mistake. But small details whispered another story. The symmetry of the bruises, the shattered glass that didn't match the trajectory of the strike, the way Charles Whitmore hovered too close to his wife, as if guarding her, or her secret. Inside Rachel's bedroom, the air still smelled faintly of paint and lavender lotion. Canvases leaned against the wall, half-finished self-portraits, distorted and emotional. On her desk sat a sketchbook, a few scattered tubes of acrylics, and a laptop still in sleep mode. Miles put on gloves, flipped open the laptop, and typed in the password hint, OneBlood. He frowned. The computer unlocked immediately. The screen lit up with a folder titled DW. Inside were hundreds of photos, candid shots of Diana, brushing her hair, reading on the patio, sleeping in the sunroom. None were posed. Every single one felt like surveillance, not affection. Then he found the journal file, scanned pages of handwritten entries. Rachel's looping handwriting spilled over the margins like an obsession running out of space. January 11th. She said she wants to stop. I can't let her. She belongs to me. February 3rd. She's lying to herself. She keeps pretending we're wrong, but she doesn't stop coming back. She'll thank me someday when we're finally the same. March 2nd, I did it. She'll never leave now. One blood, one virus, one love. Miles exhaled slowly. He had read confessions before, but this one sent a chill through him. One blood, one virus. The words repeated in multiple entries, underlined with intensity. He called out to his partner, CSI Janet Wong, who was photographing the bathroom. Janet, check for personal hygiene items, anything shared, toothbrushes, razors. A moment later, she appeared in the doorway holding 2 toothbrushes sealed in evidence bags. One was purple, worn and frayed. The other blue, newer, but with streaks of faded lipstick near the handle. Found them in Rachel's bathroom, Janet said. Blue one's not hers. DNA swabs confirm it's the stepmother's. Miles stared at the evidence bags for a long moment. The story was unfolding, and it was far uglier than he had imagined. He took the journal pages and the toothbrushes back to the evidence table. Every clue painted a picture that no one wanted to see. A secret affair, deliberate infection, obsession disguised as love, and a spiral of control that ended in blood. Later that evening, Miles interviewed Dr. Laura Kane, Diana's physician. She confirmed the timeline. HIV diagnosis confirmed 2 weeks before the killing, and Diana had been in emotional shock. She asked me, Dr. Kane said quietly, if someone could transmit the virus without physical contact, maybe through a toothbrush. That's not a question you ask unless you already know the answer. Back at the precinct, Miles reviewed his notes. He replayed Diana's statement from the night of the crime. She came at me. I panicked. But now, with Rachel's diary open in front of him, the motive twisted into something darker. This wasn't just self-defense. It was the final act of a love story that had already decayed beyond saving. The next morning, he returned to question Diana again. She sat at her dining table, pale and drawn, hands folded neatly like a penitent at confession. Charles hovered near the doorway, silent. Mrs. Whitmore, Miles began, we found some things in Rachel's room. A diary, photos, 2 toothbrushes, one belonging to you. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't look away. I told you, she said softly. She was sick. She wasn't herself. Miles laid the evidence bags on the table. Neither were you. Her composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and steady. She said what bind us, Diana whispered. That I couldn't leave if we share the same blood. I tried to stop it. I swear I did. Then why didn't you tell your husband? She looked past him, toward the rain-streaked window. Because he wouldn't have believed me. He never saw her the way I did. What she was capable of. Miles closed his notebook. Mrs. Whitmore, what happened that night wasn't just about fear. It was about power. Who held it? And who lost it? She didn't answer. She only stared at the evidence, the toothbrushes lying between them like relics of a love turned fatal. When Miles left the house, he glanced back once. Through the glass, he saw Charles place a trembling hand on his wife's shoulder. She didn't move. Outside, the rain had started again, thin, relentless, cleansing nothing. And Detective Aaron Miles knew this case wasn't just about a murder. It was about 2 people who mistook obsession for love, until the line between victim and killer disappeared completely. The trial of State versus Diana Whitmore drew quiet fascination from Seattle's elite. It was a case wrapped in silk and scandal, whispers of forbidden love, disease, and death behind the glass walls of a waterfront mansion. By the time proceedings began that October, the city's gossip columns had already written their verdict. The art curator who killed her husband's daughter out of guilt, jealousy, or both. But inside courtroom 3A, beneath the cold glow of fluorescent lights, the story was far more complicated. Diana entered each day pale and expressionless, dressed in black. Her hair, once immaculate, had turned brittle and gray around the edges. Charles Whitmore sat 2 rows behind her, hands clasped tightly in his lap. He hadn't left her side since the night of Rachel's death. Not as husband, not as protector, but as someone who still couldn't understand what pieces of his life had been real. The prosecution painted Diana as a manipulative stepmother who crossed moral boundaries and killed to silence her secret. They called Rachel's friends from art school, who described the girl's intensity, her obsession with control, and the whispers that she was in love with someone she shouldn't be. Then came the evidence, the photos, the journal, the toothbrushes. Each piece landed like a stone in a lake, ripples spreading through the courtroom. The prosecutor's voice echoed. One blood, one virus, one love. The phrase lingered in the air like poison. When Diana's defense took the floor, the story shifted. Her attorney, Sarah Malloy, spoke softly, with the weary calm of someone who had seen too much of humanity's damage. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "this case is not about a murder. It is about survival. It is about a woman cornered by fear, physical, emotional, and psychological, by someone who exploited her grief and her isolation." She walked slowly past the jury box, letting each word sink in. Diana Whitmore is not a monster. She is a woman who made mistakes, terrible human mistakes, and then faced the unthinkable. The courtroom was silent. When Diana took the stand, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I wanted to protect her," she said, hands trembling. "After her mother died, she was lost. We both were. I thought I could help her heal. But somewhere something twisted. She started to believe we were more." She paused, fighting back tears. "I didn't stop it soon enough. And when I tried to, she changed. She said if I left, she'd destroy me. That we were bound forever." Malloy handed her a photo, Rachel's self-portrait, the one shown at the charity gala. Diana stared at it for a long time. "I see her pain now," she said softly. "I just wish I'd seen it before it became mine." During cross-examination, the prosecutor pressed her hard. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you saying you were an innocent participant?" "No," she answered. "I'm saying I was a weak one." "Then why didn't you tell your husband the truth?" Diana's gaze drifted toward Charles, seated behind her. "Because I didn't want him to see what I'd become." When she stepped down, Charles finally wept. Quietly, hopelessly. The jury deliberated for 12 hours. Outside, the rain returned, steady and gray, the kind of Seattle rain that never stops, only softens. At 9:43 a.m., the verdict was read, guilty of involuntary manslaughter in self-defense. No murder, no premeditation, just tragedy. The judge sentenced her to 10 years probation, psychiatric supervision, and community service, a mercy disguised as punishment. As the gavel fell, Diana closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she exhaled without shaking. After the trial, reporters swarmed the steps of the courthouse. Cameras flashed. Microphones thrust forward. "Mrs. Whitmore, do you have any comment? Did you love her? Do you feel remorse?" She said nothing, only lifted her face to the rain and walked silently toward the waiting car where Charles sat behind the wheel. They drove home in silence. The radio played softly, Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, a piece Rachel once practiced for hours. When they reached the house, Charles didn't turn off the engine. "She was sick," he said finally, staring out at the water. "But so were we." Diana nodded. "I know. Do you still believe it was love?" She took a long moment before answering. "It started that way. But love doesn't survive in darkness. It mutates." He looked at her then, eyes tired, voice trembling. "So what happens now?" "We live," she whispered. "That's all we can do." Charles squeezed the steering wheel. "And if the world never forgives us, then we forgive ourselves." That night, Diana stood alone on the patio overlooking Puget Sound. The bronze sculpture, now cleaned and returned after evidence release, sat on the mantel inside, gleaming faintly under the low light. The rain misted her hair, cold and steady. She thought about Rachel's last words, about how obsession had disguised itself as devotion until neither could tell the difference. She had once believed she could shape her life like clay, molding it into beauty, order, meaning. But now she understood. Some things crumble no matter how tightly you hold them. From the open window, behind her came the echo of Detective Miles's voice during her last interview. "Love isn't supposed to draw blood, Mrs. Whitmore." She closed her eyes, letting the rain wash over her. In the end, the newspapers moved on. The case faded from the headlines, replaced by fresher tragedies. But among Seattle's gray whispers, people still spoke of the Whitmore scandal, the stepmother and the stepdaughter, the forbidden affair that ended in death. And those who lived near the waterfront swore that on certain rainy nights, when the tide was high and the fog hung low, you could see a woman standing by the glass balcony, face turned toward the sound. Her reflection doubled in the storm. Some said she was praying. Others said she was waiting. But those who truly knew the story understood. She wasn't waiting for forgiveness. She was waiting for silence.